Hello everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Amanda Ostrander. I am a teacher-turned-homeschool mom, and this is Raising A to Z, a place where we talk about all things homeschooling. And today I'm going to show you how to take a very simple unit study and build it out into making it something more exciting and enriching. I think unit studies are the unsung heroes of homeschooling. It is such a great way to get so much different information into kids in a way that is fun and interesting and exciting. It's a great way to get kids to be able to pick what they're learning about, because you can kind of say like, hey guys, what do you want to learn about? And then do a unit study on that. I think it's a great way to get family style learning involved, because it's very easy to pick a topic and learn about it as a family. And I love unit studies. And I know a lot of other people love unit studies too. They're very, very versatile. You can use them as like your main curriculum. You can use them kind of sporadically. And you can also like just use them as something that you need to add a little life to your homeschool while you're in a rut. A unit study is a great option. So they're very, very versatile. And I personally think they're great. We do a unit study pretty much all the time. It's our main curriculum outside of like a language and a math is we do some kind of unit study. And in my house, we like to kind of alternate between topics if we can. So science and then like a history and then like a science and a geography or social studies back to science. And we do this kind of throughout the year. Typically for us, I find that a unit usually takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the topic, on the curriculum, if we've been sick. Let's be real. But so that ends up being about 7 to 8 unit studies a year for us, which I think is pretty good. But that also means that I have a lot of experience, because this is my 7th year of homeschooling. I have a lot of experience taking a unit study and making it into more. Unit studies are really cool because you can do them just as the unit study. I know a lot of people who do that. They just take their unit study and they just do it. And that's great. If that's what you want to do, amazing. But you can make a unit study so much more simply by building it out. And it does require a little bit more planning, a little bit. But it's very simple things that you can do that take what you want to learn about this month and make it so much more all-encompassing, so much more connected to other skills and other things that you're focusing on. And it makes it more fun in general, at least for me and my kids. So I'm going to take this video and I'm going to show you guys exactly how I build out a unit and make it in something a little bit more enriching for my family. How do we start? First off, start with curriculum. By curriculum, I mean something that that has done some of the work for you. Whether that is a series of printables from Teachers Pay Teachers. Maybe you found a unit study on a website somewhere. Maybe you're doing something like the Good and the Beautiful science units. Maybe you have one of my True North history units or social studies units. Maybe you have found something really cool, like I said, on Teachers Pay Teachers. Basically, what we're going to do is kind of start with something that gives us some foundation of what's going to be covered, what kind of assignments or something that we might be doing throughout. Curriculum is a tool that we use as kind of like a guide. We can veer off and skip things here and there, but curriculum does make it a little bit easier to like guide us along the path. If your kids pick a topic that is like out there and is more difficult to find, because sometimes they do, I definitely recommend finding kind of like a book that is a spine, something that you can like read with them and use that as like your foundational text for what you're doing. But once you have a curriculum, which I think a lot of people do like having a curriculum, it is, like I said, it feels like a little bit of a safety net and a little bit of like a support. It really does help us along the way. So once you have a curriculum and something you're excited about, we can add things to it and build it out to make it something really exciting. These are things that I like to add to my unit studies, and they are really, really helpful. So the first thing I would add to any unit study is a novel. I love adding a novel because it is a bigger story. It is a bigger text, which means that you're going to definitely get bigger vocabulary. You're going to get more interesting plots. You're going to get deeper plots. There's going to be more plot twists. You're going to get more interesting characters and arc developments. So having a novel that is somehow connected to your unit study is a very simple way to kind of expand your world. So for example, if you were going to do like a unit on ancient Egypt, you might do Ra the cat detective. That's the name of it. Ra the Cat Detective, which is about a little cat that lives in Egypt and it has to solve mystery of some kind. But it's in ancient Egypt, so you have some like connections over to your text. Something like this would be a great option for a lot of people because you're going to find little bits of things that are connected to what you're learning. And so kids are going to make connections from their unit study to this novel. And bonus, if you want to swap out your language program for a novel study. So we use novel studies primarily through the Brave Writer as our language program. So as much as possible, I do try to find a novel study that fits the topic that we're going to be doing in our unit study. Because I do find that just makes it so much easier because then I'm not doing a language program and a novel study. I'm just doing a novel study. But the fact that I've now connected them means most of our day is now talking about whatever our unit study topic is. And so that kind of gets really cool because we're like just bringing in more text, and that's always better. If you don't find a novel, the next thing I would do is bring in books in general, picture books or field guides or nonfiction books, and bring those in and read those on top of whatever is in your unit study. You can find a lot of great picture books in general. And because there are so many picture books out there and there's a lot shorter, you probably have a lot more options available to you. So if you don't have a novel study, get your hands on some good picture books. And even if you do have a good novel study, a couple good picture books is just fun. So that's the first thing I would do. Find a novel and or a book. The next thing that I would like to add to any unit study is some documentaries. Documentaries are underrated, I think, in the world of education. I remember when I was a kid and we would like wait for the TV to be rolled in. Do you guys remember that? When they would bring the TV in and say like, hey guys, we're going to watch a movie today. And that was like the best thing ever. That was the best school day ever. Think of that. You get to do that with your kids on a regular basis, right? Screen time is not a bad thing all the time, especially if you can find great educational content. There's different levels of quality of screen time. Documentaries are at the top of my list. There's so many great titles. And if you're like, oh, I don't think my kids can handle a documentary. A, you'd be surprised. B, there's a lot more documentaries out there that are geared towards young children and families than you might realize. And 3, I also include educational shows as like documentaries because sometimes the Magic School Bus explains things better than this 2-hour documentary on Discovery. It's true. It's honest. It's the truth. Magic School Bus, we have the entire first series, and every single one of those movies has held up. With the exception of the one on computers, because computers have changed so much since 1997. And Pluto isn't considered a planet anymore. That's it. Those are the only facts in the entire series that don't hold up to life today. So finding some really great documentaries and stuff are fantastic. A, they're going to hook your kids in. They're going to be so interested in what they're learning. But B, and this is like a sneaky thing for parents, they can be a great hook when you just don't have anything left in the tank. If you are having a down day where you're just like, I'm exhausted, maybe you've had a bout of sickness, or maybe you're sick, or the kids are sick, or something like that. Take a break and throw in a documentary, and they're just like enthralled. Like, it's fantastic. So a documentary is a great little thing to have in your back pocket, and just, pulling it out just for fun sometimes. Like having like a movie day in the middle of a rainy day and like pulling out a documentary. Best thing ever. Best thing ever. And you'll be amazed at how many times they're like, hey, yeah, we learned about that. Or like later on, you're going to do a unit, like working in your unit stay, and they're going to like pull some information they learned from their documentary. And it's fantastic. Another thing that I sometimes do, like I said, movie day in the middle of a rainy day. Why not? Pull some movies. Like just regular movies that are connected. It is surprising how many of these movies are going to have information in them that your kids are going to connect with and like talk about later. Or my personal favorite thing that happens when you watch movies that are connected to your unit study topic, they correct them. That's probably my favorite thing, is like when you're watching a movie and the kids are like, that's not true. We learned that this happens, and from our unit study, that's not how that goes, or that's not how this works. And then you get to say like, oh, that's right, you are correct. This movie like didn't get its facts straight. And because oftentimes it's like a cartoon, right? Like, let's be real. And so like, you get to talk about how those things are connected and how you're right, this isn't what we thought it was, and that's not how it is. It starts a really interesting conversation, and the more you're having these conversations, the more those mental connections are being made. And that's really cool when kids get to do something that they think is fun. Like watching a movie is amazing. But then they get to see the little facts and things being played out on the screen, and again, make those connections when they are either confirming information they learned or correcting information that they learned. The next thing I like to do when I have a unit study is add some kind of activity. When my kids were younger, this was often like some kind of like hands-on activity where we might do like build something. It might be a sensory bin. We did some different experiments, like do some kind of things like that is connected to our unit study topic. As they are getting older, this might turn into something different. It might become like a writing assignment, a research paper. It might become one of our first things that we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be doing pamphlets, like informational pamphlets on, because we're doing kingdoms and classifications. So they're going to pick a kingdom, mammals, reptiles, insects, those kinds of things. And they're going to like write a little informational pamphlet. And that's kind of going to be like one of their like projects. But you can also like move into like slideshow presentations. If you have a middle schooler, slideshow presentations are like the thing right now. It is such a fun thing to have them like make a slideshow and like present something to you. So you have lots of options. Like I said, you can do experiments, dioramas, or like models are really cool and really popular. Writing projects of some kind are a great option. And so when they were younger, I would do like 2, 3, 4 per unit. Now that they're a little bit older, I often will do like one big activity or kind of project that's like all encompassing, and then break that down into like 2 or 3 smaller parts so that we can have a little bit of time every week to work on it so that by the end of the unit, we've finished the project. But, it feels like little pieces all along. So an activity or something that can like show you when they're finished what they've learned is a great option. And then the last thing that I would recommend would be a field trip. Now, this isn't always possible. I get it. You can't go to Egypt, to the pyramids, to see that kind of stuff when you are studying ancient Egypt. Like, it's not always possible. And, while a museum might be a great option, it still might not be possible. Like, the closest museum to us that has Egyptian stuff is the ROM in Toronto, and that's 4.5 hours away. So, like, that's not always an option. But if you can find an option that is a field trip that is something that's nearby and doable, amazing. I like to joke around that sometimes we do big things and sometimes we do little things. Sometimes a nature walk is a great option. Sometimes a bigger trip might encompass a couple of unit studies worth of field trips. And it's just the way it works out. And my favorite thing is when you do a field trip like that, from my experience, my kids are just astounded that we got to learn about these things. There was one year we did a big family vacation to New York, and we were doing this full like week in New York, and we did like the Lion King, and we did the Met, and we did the Natural History Museum. And I remember like going through, and my kids were like, "Mom, there's a fashion exhibit here at the Met. We did a whole unit on fashion. This is so cool. Mom, we did this ocean unit and we went to the aquarium. That's so cool. Mom, look, we learned about this and now we're seeing it in this like science center. That's so cool." And I'm just going like, yes, guys, I planned that. But in their world, it's all coincidence. And then they get to see what they've learned and they'll point it out and tell you all about it and what it reminds them of. And that's amazing. But I will say children live in a world of coincidences, which are not coincidences. They're all planned by me. But it is what it is. So anyway, a field trip is a great option. And like I said, there's so many cool places out there. If you have an idea for a field trip, definitely ask friends. Like, hey, does anyone have a place that we could go that has something? Where, you know, animals, birds, reptiles, ancient Egypt, what... You'd be surprised at how many people have like gone to see something really cool and you're just like, oh, that's actually nearby. Oh, that's not too far. That's a great option. And you can actually like do stuff. And sometimes it's a great option if you have some friends who are homeschoolers to like, hey guys, we're going to go do this together. A field trip is amazing because it's bringing what they learned to life and they get to see it in real life and they get to understand, you know, what it actually looks like and what it actually was. And it just brings it all a little closer to them, because it's not just words in a book anymore. It's actual mummies, or it's actual, you know, outfits, or it's actually like a sea lion swimming right there, right? It just brings it all to life. So before you guys are like, okay, this seems like a lot of information, let me explain and show you how I build out a unit of my own. So this is a unit that I have built out with my kids. It is a bird unit that I did last year, not this past spring, the spring before. So 2024, spring 2024, bird unit. Okay. So the curriculum I used was the Beautiful Birds unit. Fantastic. Okay. That was our foundation. That was our spine. That's where we started. The novel that we did was The Trumpet of the Swan, which was a Brave Writer novel study. But that was a great hook in because we talked a lot about swans and birds and waterfowl and migration and flying. And the kids were like, oh, we learned about flight with birds. We learned about eggs because there's a whole thing about eggs hatching. We learned about waterfowl. And so we were able to make all of these like connections and talk about how cool they are. And sometimes something would happen in the book and they're like, that's not real. And I'm like, well, no, it's a story. It's fiction. But the fact that they knew it wasn't real and they were able to tell me why that was like a ridiculous thing to happen in a story is exactly what we're talking about. We want to make those incredible connections, right? For books, we had a lot of field guides and stories. So that things that I found, like Birds of North America type of books. We also we read a book, I think it was called Owl at Sea, which was about a barn owl that like got lost and flew out to an oil rig out in the middle of the ocean and it like had to be rescued. We read some books about flamingos. And like sometimes they're silly little stories, but there was one about a flamingo that kept changing color because of what it ate. And Zoe was like so annoyed the entire book because flamingos only turn pink because they eat shrimp. They don't change color to match other things. And every time this flamingo would turn like orange or like pink or purple or blue, she was like, that's not how it works. And it was like the funniest thing ever. Anyway, it was hilarious. Documentaries that we watched, there was like March of the Penguin. There was one called Dancing Birds, which is about all like the mating rituals and like feathers and stuff of birds. So like some of them like do dances, some of them build nests, some of them have these like really weird calls, some of them have like tail feathers that they flap in the air, like all these things. The kids, it was like an hour on Netflix, I think, and they were like fascinated by it. We also watched Magic School Bus because, like I said, sometimes Magic School Bus gets the best, simplest terms. We watched the episode Get Cracked, which is about eggs and embryo formation and hatching eggs. That is actually Zoe's favorite episode of all time. But we watched those. Movies that we watched we watched all of these movies, but not necessarily within the month. We watched Happy Feet with the penguin. We watched Rio with the macaw. And we watched Migration because that had just come out. And the connections the kids were making were insane. Especially with Migration. They were like, that's not how migration works. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's not how migration. She goes, ducks don't fly. They were really annoyed because they're like, mallards don't go to Jamaica, Mom. And I was like, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't write the movie. But anyway, those were kind of movies we watched. Our activity that we did that month, we did a hatch program. I have a whole video about hatching eggs out. If you're ever interested and you're doing a bird unit, I'll put it here. But we did a whole hatch program, which got us into chickens, and now we have chickens. But we hatched these eggs, and every day we would look at them and see how they're developing, and it was super cool. And then we watched the little chicks hatch, and that was like the best thing ever. Anyway, we love it. It was great. And then we did 2 field trips. One was right then when were doing our bird unit, we went on a nature walk at a local park that is known for its waterfowl. So there's swans, ducks, chickadees, all kinds of birds, and we went and saw what we could see. And then just before we started this unit, we happened to be in Niagara Falls, and they have a huge aviary there. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a big aviary right down, like just across the street from the falls, basically. And we went in there, and that was phenomenal. And the kids were like, it was kind of like a primer field trip. So we went there before we learned about the birds, but we did learn about the birds, and it was super cool. And I highly recommend it if you're ever in Niagara. And so that is what we did. It doesn't feel like too much, especially if you're able to take your novel study and replace your language, but it ends up taking something as simple as like a little work packet and making it so much more enriched and so much more all-encompassing and so much more interconnected that kids are learning a lot more. They are making the connections bigger, wider, and deeper, which is what we always want. And it makes, for me, it makes unit study learning a lot more fun and a lot more engaging because everything's connected. And the more you learn that everything's connected, the more learning just like blows their minds, I think. Like, because literally everything's connected. So that's how I would build out a unit. I hope you guys like this video. If you have questions about building out a unit, or you have some great unit studies that you've done and you want to share some activities that you've done in unit studies to help other people maybe build out some really cool units, field trip tips, ideas, let's put them down in the comments. Let's help each other out. If you love unit studies, I highly recommend you take a little bit of time, a little bit of planning, and build them out. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed so that you know when we're putting out some cool videos, which are pretty much every Wednesday. Unless you're a member, you get early access. Those come out on Monday. Make sure that you are following us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, because I'm always putting cool stuff up there. You can see how I do unit studies in my homeschooling. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.